Hello and welcome to episode number 4 of the Worlds Adrift podcast from Bossa Studios. My name is Malford and I am the host for this episode. Joining me is Julia and Jaspar.
Yay.
Hello. Hi. Sorry to disappoint Nick from YouTube. Julia is now back from Germany.
Ha 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 ha.
Ha ha ha. Here she is. Okay. So Jaspar, this is your first time on the podcast. Potentially this is your first introduction to the community, apart from by Smashing Fools and Deck Splash. So do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I was the world's best at Deck Splash.
Yep.
I'm now senior QA on Worlds Adrift.
So you're the most experienced Worlds Adrift player on the team. Is that right?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Like one or two that are close, but
Okay.
yeah, getting there.
Yeah. See, the difference between a game that's in development and a game that's out to the community is when the game is just sort of sitting in the office, it's very easy to become the best of the world at it. But when hundreds of people can play
small.
it, when hundreds of people can play it, things get pretty. It's pretty difficult to be the best. So I think we've probably got some community players out there who'd give you a run for your money at shit battles. But it's certainly within the office, you're a skilled player.
Yeah, I'd say so. That's a fair assessment.
Yeah, you need to be on the QA team.
Yeah.
You definitely don't. Anyway. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to run through some of the news that we've got sitting here. Right, so let's start with the fixes to the PTS server. Do you want to go through these, Jaspar?
Sure, yeah. So one we got, which was a fix to the chat system. Multiple areas in the game that you just couldn't talk to people, the chat wouldn't work, or it would send multiple messages. This has now been fixed now.
Exciting.
It's very similar to the crew beacon fix, which had the same sort of issues, and you just couldn't teleport to your crew members via the crew beacon. But
So speaking of that, it's now fixed as well.
yes, that is now fixed.
Great.
What about lag?
Yeah, we had some major lag issues in the previous release, but yeah, in that and the PTS now, they should be completely gone because we worked hard at them and we fixed them.
We chased the lag monster down.
Yeah.
And we
It
gutted
wasn't very fast.
It was slow
getting
and
lag.
painful, yeah. That we also had an issue with Alliance chat where if you left an Alliance whilst in it, you would be stuck in it and you wouldn't be able to talk to anybody ever again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we fixed that and now you can talk to your friends again. So that's good.
That is very important, it turns out, in an MMO.
Who knew?
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing we wanted to talk about was what RC stands for, because a couple of people have been asking that. RC stands for Release Candidate.
Yep.
So that's when a build or a version of the game that we have is basically it's the version of the game that we hope we can release, and we're just sort of checking it through and hoping that everything is fine with it.
So the confusion arose from, the PTS is generally considered an RC. And people kind of assumed that it's the ready-to-go version of it.
Yeah.
It isn't. It's as close as we can hope to get to it.
Yeah, so what it is when we've just, all the features are in and they've been sort of tested individually, but it's a final build that we are still testing, right?
Yeah, so the PTS is slightly different to an actual RC in the sense that it goes live so the players can help find all the other bugs.
Yeah.
And then we'll sort of make an RC from that. It will be quite similar and it will change. If there's any blocking issues or things that will really break the game, then we will fix them for the actual RC. Yeah. Essentially.
And did we catch anything specific that anyone from the community pointed out recently? Oh, at the top of your head, I know you've got spreadsheets and spreadsheets and spreadsheets, but...
Well, I think the ones I mentioned were the main ones because obviously, people couldn't chat to each other, so everyone sees that straight away. It's when you can't chat to any of your friends, so of course we have lots of people from the community telling us this, and we've obviously gone and had to fix it. So yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so the next thing on the list here we've got is to talk about the community podcast, which was a very welcome community effort at 2 hours long. It was quite the behemoth. Julia, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. First of all, thank you guys. I had a list. I accidentally deleted it of all the names. Top of my head, it's Floshko, Snappy Texas, Cora, There were about 10 people on that podcast, and absolutely everyone was so wonderful and eloquent, and the topics they discussed were fantastic about Worlds. That was actually where before I left to Germany, the growing map came up a few times, and it wasn't the first time it came up, which is why I was like, what? Where did this come from? Why, Malford, tell me. And as we covered it in the last episode, it's not happening.
No.
And we still don't know where this originated from. So the podcast raised some really interesting kind of issues, questions, like basically calling Bossa out and giving us some things to work with here. One of which was Bossa Priorities and Communication. So it was, a lot of it mentioned us talking about certain things that we might be implementing into the game, and we want to implement into the game. We talk about it, and then it turns out that we can't do it. And relating back to the map issue, it's simply because we're still learning what we're doing, how the tech works. And already we are stretching the realms of possibilities when it comes to physics in an MMO environment. Malford, Jaspar, you can probably tell us more about why that is a difficult thing to do, and why sometimes there's this miscommunication of us talking about wanting to implement something, or the community asking about something, and that might seem simple from a distance, but in actual reality is quite a complex thing to implement in our environment.
Yeah, I think there's some sort of obvious examples of things that, are simple in a lot of games, but because of the nature of our game are difficult. For example, what we just mentioned, the chat thing, right? The way that, in World of Warcraft, etc., it's very easy to set up individual chat channels that do individual things. But because of the way that the server is handled on Worlds Adrift, which is, completely sort of unique, there aren't any other games that do things in the same way. We had this thing where there were sort of localized areas where even local chat wouldn't work because they work on this completely new system. So a lot of things that are easy to do in other games just don't work in the same way because we have this large, persistent, open simulated world where lots of things are happening, lots of things are being simulated at the same time. So things just work differently. And there's a lot of things that we've talked about wanting to do that they are probably possible. A lot of them are certainly possible, but it's just that we have to prioritize what we can spend our time on. And if something that, is a pretty cool idea, is going to take 6 to 8 months to do, and something else, which is also a pretty cool idea, is going to take 2 to 3 weeks or something, then it's difficult to justify spending the extra time. What we've done in the past is we've shot for these very big, long features, and they take such a long time that, that's part of the reason why you end up with the situation we've been in, where we've had so many updates and very few meaningful changes to the game. So what we need to do going forward is find the balance between these very long-term features that we like to talk about, that are more complicated than you might expect to implement, and things that are much simpler and can sort of piggyback over systems that we already have. What we're going to be doing in the next few updates is trying to find that balance and trying to figure out what the best way of doing that is.
So hopefully that will kind of even out the communication and priorities view for the community and players in general, for why we say certain things and why it takes so long, and how we prioritize the features or the bug fixes. And probably Jaspar can attest to the fact that sometimes a small bug that we think we fixed and we found and we've replicated just isn't fixed.
Yeah, there are many different things that can go wrong, especially with so many systems that make the game work, essentially. There are just hundreds of things that could go wrong with just the smallest thing that it might look like. Yeah,
part of the thing is that because the game is a sort of collection of systems rather than bespoke individual bits of content, a lot of things that you wouldn't expect to be connected are connected. So when you pull on one string, you can sort of unearth problems with tons of other things. So, I mean, that's another thing we're working on in the background, which is this, separating some of those systems out, making things a little bit more individual so that, one thing isn't going to break a bunch of other things.
Domino effect.
Yeah.
I love it. The next question that came up was, how do we listen to the feedback from the player base? And I think it's different for everyone. Like we've got 3 kind of departments on each side here, at the very least, and there's as many departments as there's. I try to feed back the information and the kind of the undergoing
sentiment
back to the entire team, but everyone tends to jump in and observe their own information, because normally every team knows what they're looking for specifically. So QA has Gracie for community QA.
Yeah.
And obviously we've got customer support who log all the support tickets, and we know what's happening as a popular bug. And thanks to videos and everything, QA gets more feedback on how to replicate certain bugs, and Jaspar can probably tell you more about that.
Yeah. So obviously Gracie will go through the forums and the community feedback and Discord and everywhere that it gets reported. Then all the information that we've got on that will go into our bug database as a work in progress bug, and then we will work on it in-house and basically just try and find out like steps to reproduce and any other information we can on this issue, and work with the devs if we find anything. But as it's been said, videos and things like that are really helpful when it comes to reporting your bugs to us, because obviously they just give us a depiction straight away of where it is and what's happening.
And that obviously feeds into the devs, knowing how their code is working in the real environment, really.
Yeah, it helps us to track down and figure out where the problems that are arising are coming from. Another example of listening to a community is I've had a conversation recently with some members of the community and been listening to what they've been talking about when they've been talking about how to design the upcoming map. So one of the specific pieces of feedback that they talked about was there's this sort of thing that happens at the moment in the Badlands where, there's no fuel in the Badlands. So when people who are in there engaging in PvP run out of fuel, they just sort of nip over to the next biome over to refuel. And a lot of the time, those guys end up back in tier 1, picking up fuel from there, which is, obviously quite kind of sometimes quite cool for new players because they see these new ships and they can kind of aspire to that. But on the other hand, it means that they're very vulnerable to these very powerful ships. So in the upcoming map, there are no Badlands tiers that border with any tier 1 starting biomes. Woo. Yeah, so there's just a very specific thing where somebody mentioned a problem and we've just sort of adjusted it for the map coming up.
And how did you kind of come across it? As a Discord?
That was on Discord, yeah. Someone just started sending me direct messages on Discord, and I've also had somebody was talking to Gracie about it, so she came over to talk to me about it.
Do you ever pop into like the forums and kind of read through people's discussions and stuff? Yeah,
I was in the forums yesterday, in fact, reading some stuff about somebody was talking about. They were basically linked me a bunch of videos about. Or linked in the forum. I was tagged in a tweet. It was about this forum post, which is basically talking about a lot of the things that we've talked about in the past and trying to sort of. I think they were trying to sort of point us towards the original vision for the game and make sure that we kept that in mind as we went forward, which I think is quite a helpful thing. Obviously, the way that Worlds Adrift works is it's a sort of living, breathing game, which we're developing alongside. Players, so we're adjusting what we do with the game based on how people play it and that sort of stuff. So we don't necessarily feel like we have to stick to things that we said 3 years ago, because we want to make the game the best thing it can be and for the broadest sort of player base we can. So there's some pros and cons to that, and I certainly read the whole thing, but I don't think I'll necessarily feel too beholden to, to do the things that sort of, we mentioned in a video 4 years ago or 3 years ago.
Ideas evolve, better ideas come up, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, but then again, there's something really valuable in sort of going back to the original vision for something. So it's interesting to read that stuff and useful for thinking about how things go in the future.
And do you guys like the other question that came up is, do you have time to respond? And I know that we are all quite active on Discord, especially when like there's a topic that's going on related to specifically our stuff, or me just trolling community members. But yeah, do you guys? What is your favorite? I know you've responded to comments on Tech Tuesdays and blog posts. Do you guys ever pop into the forums and actually have conversations nowadays, or? Rarely.
I mean, to be honest, most of the time when I actually get to read the posts that people have had conversations about, it's the conversation's usually already finished. So I'd sort of be necroposting because obviously you've got to balance that with the actual work that we're doing. So I keep an ear to the ground and pay attention to what people are talking about. But usually, by the time I get to them, the conversation, especially on Discord, because that thing moves so quickly, the thing has already been and gone by the time I read it. So I don't normally get too involved, but I do read stuff.
Yeah, I have quite similar feelings about that. Like, I really enjoy looking at comments on things that we put out, like patch notes and stuff, and just seeing what the community have to say about it. And obviously, sometimes it helps find bugs, right? So it's always nice to have a look. So I do enjoy just going through it from time to time, definitely.
Yeah.
Basically, Bossa is a bunch of lurkers. I know Luke is always lurking in the background because he will, like, when the time is right, he pulls a Batman and just appears in a cloud of smoke. Same as Herb, actually. So they're always around. Right, and that brings us on to some of the questions that we've had on comments around YouTube, around the podcast posts. Starting with Voshko. Thank you for the podcast once again. Are we going to playtest any of the new stuff on the PTS before implementation?
Yeah, we should be able to get, hopefully a couple of weeks before the next update goes out, we'll be putting some stuff on the PTS. I especially because there's hopefully there'll be some interesting feedback on things like Tier 0 and that kind of stuff, which because that sort of thing is the sort of thing where iteration makes a lot of sense, and it really want to pay attention to how people interact with it and see what we can do with that.
Actually, there's a very good follow-up question from Dragonbone.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if will Haven be skippable? Haven being Tier 0, as we previously mentioned. I'll try it the first time, but after a few wipes... ...
Yeah. So it should be skippable once you've done it once. So regardless of what characters you're playing, if I'm playing with a new character, as long as I've done it with a previous character, you should be able to skip it.
Cool. All right. J. Brads is asking, can you talk about the future of shipbuilding?
So what's the future of shipbuilding? I don't know if there's any... We've been working on, in the background, a redesign somewhat of the shipbuilding system and some of the new ways of doing certain things. But there's nothing finalized yet. So I don't know exactly what's going to change in the future. I know there are certain things like... that we've talked about for a long time, like being able to mirror parts and that kind of stuff. So you'll be able to, put things keep things reasonably symmetrical. That's something we'd hopefully like to be able to do.
What about asymmetrical?
Oh, well, they're already incredibly asymmetrical. If you look at the ships.
I mean, building the frame asymmetrically.
Right, building the asymmetric frames. I don't know. So again, this is something where, as I said, as we're working on it in the background, this is something we'd be really keen to understand what it is that people want from this. So if anyone has specific ideas, feel free to shoot them over to me or to Luke, and we'll try and sort of incorporate some of that stuff and pay attention to what you guys are wanting as we redesign it. But I don't know when exactly that'll be prioritized. That might be a ways off.
Right.
Yeah, we've had some because like way back in 1.18 or 1.9, I think, or 1.7 maybe, we had a little bit of addition. We had like the scale guide put in, and you can now see the decks on the ships. That was kind of like the start of it, but we've always had plans to have like a much bigger design for a rehaul of that. So it'll be in the future. For now, we don't know. But.
Because ciphers have been pushed back to the next update.
Yeah, they should be in 28, I think.
In 28, yeah.
I think so.
Okay, cool. Right, then we've got... Vith asks, so will I be able to drunk pilot my ship? No, Vith, you won't. You're not allowed to do that. That's
Just
a
Vith.
very bad idea.
So, I mean, the way the drunk effect works, I have a feeling it won't actually affect... I mean, it'll affect the visuals, but it won't affect the actual ability to pilot. So, you know, just like in real life, being drunk doesn't affect your ability to drive.
At all.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. No, don't. Like, do not take this advice.
I'm a great life coach.
AL from YouTube asks, so are we getting hoverboards? Maybe a cool way for crew members to launch off the ship and approach an island.
Sort of. Yeah. So the way that what we're going to have is you're going to be able to put lifters on panels, and then maybe if you use your mag boots to connect to that, and then have somebody shoot a grappling hook out the back, then you can drag them along. We don't know exactly how that's going to work, but
I don't think we've actually shown off mag boots yet.
Yeah, I think we talked about it in the last podcast.
We talked about it.
We haven't
It
shown
might
them
have been in a video.
Yes.
Give it time.
Yeah.
Confirmed.
So there you go. Hoverboards confirmed. Just not very good ones.
Just planks.
Yeah.
It's going to be Treasure Planet, Poor Man's Edition. Hector Alvarez asks, what's the release date for 27?
Have we announced that, Julia?
No, we don't actually have a concrete release. We have sort of dates we're aiming for.
Yeah, we have an internal date.
We don't have a concrete release for that. But obviously, once the PTS starts coming up with 27 things, you'll know it's within a few weeks from then.
Yeah.
So right now we're aiming for the end of September.
Yeah.
Like mid-endish September. So it's not too far away. On that note, next week, as this podcast goes out, next week, we can definitely probably say that 26 is going to be out eventually.
We can certainly say it's going to be out eventually.
It will eventually be out.
Yeah, confirmed eventually.
It's as today's stand-up mentioned, we're in the final testing stages of 26, which means everything on the PTS that you have tested should be mostly fixed at the moment, and going through final iterations. And QA have just been finishing up on a few things, just one or two things more, but hopefully all being well sooner rather than later. Yeah, soon TM.
Soon TM. It's our catchphrase.
Yes.
All right.
Rebrand now.
Great. So, okay, that I think covers everything.
That does indeed cover most of the things.
Okay, well, I'll do the outro then, shall I?
Yes, you shall.
Okay, then. Thanks, everybody, for listening to episode number 4 of the Worlds Adrift podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can do that on worldsadrift.com, on facebook.com/Worlds Adrift, or on Twitter @Worlds Adrift. You can also speak to us there directly. Julia will link our Twitter handles in the show notes, I'm sure.
I will.
Yes, definitely. So with that, I've been Malford, and this is Jaspar.
Yep.
And here's Julia.
Hi and bye and aloha.
Right. Cheers, guys.
Bye, everyone.
See you next week.
I love you. Bye.